There have been some trade rumors going around John Wall's name, but does anyone actually want John Wall at this point? Let's get into this. Quickly before we get the video started, if you guys enjoyed this video and want to see more NBA content just like this one, hit that subscribe button and that post notification bell. Anyways, back to the video. Ever since John Wall was actually drafted into the NBA by the Washington Wizards, he's always been known as one of the quickest guards we have in the NBA and one of the most athletic guards we have in the NBA as well. All the way back in the 2010 NBA season, which was John Wall's rookie season with the Washington Wizards, he averaged a pretty good 16.5 points per game, and ever since then he's continuously gotten better, which really tells you how great of a talent this guy is, but it also shows you the work ethic that John Wall was able to put in each and every season. When you actually look at John Wall's game, you can see over the years he's added a few different things to his game. When John Wall originally came into the NBA, he truly relied on his speed and athleticism to get by defenders and get all the way to the basket and either posterize dunk them or finish around the basket with pretty crafty layups. But something that John Wall really added within his game and really made his game a lot more efficient is his jump shooting. John Wall, maybe a lot of people don't know this, but he was not a great three-point shooter or a mid-range shooter whatsoever when he came into the NBA. But as the seasons progressed for John Wall, each and every season you can see him get better and better, especially at that mid-range shot. And at this point in John Wall's career, he's actually money from that mid-range area. And in terms of his three-point shooting, he's definitely a lot better than he was before. He's still not a great three-point shooter or that good of a three-point shooter, but John Wall is definitely the type of guy that coming into the NBA, as I mentioned before in the video, was not a good shooter whatsoever and really worked on it each and every offseason, because that's really when you see improvement, working during the offseason. And at this point, John Wall is a pretty serviceable three-point shooter. Now at this point, obviously John Wall is not the same type of player that he was in the past, but at the same time, I think John Wall still has some talent and still has a decent game going for him. But let's take John Wall's game point by point to see what he can currently do in the NBA. So of course, still at this point, John Wall's main ability is definitely his driving and finishing ability. When John Wall gets to the basket, even with all the injuries, he's still pretty athletic. He can dunk over you from time to time. He's not doing that as much as he used to in the past, as I mentioned, due to all the injuries that he's had. But he's still very crafty around the basket and can finish around you with pretty crafty layups as well, and uses athleticism pretty effectively, even at this stage in his career. But now talking about his mid-range shooting ability, as I mentioned before in the video, at this point, John Wall's kind of automatic from that mid-range area. He's a very good pull-up mid-range shooter. He can obviously catch and shoot from that mid-range area, and also he definitely has a floater within his game, which in my opinion, I mentioned this in a lot of videos, but I think every point guard in the NBA has to have a floater within their game. It's just so important and so crucial to really make them a very efficient scorer. John Wall somewhat has that post turnaround fadeaway within his game, but at that size, at 6'3", and John Wall's also a point guard, you don't typically see that from those guys, so that's not something that really he would need, but he has shown the ability to make that shot from time to time, which is pretty nice to see. But now talking about John Wall's three-point shooting ability, he definitely has a pull-up three-point shot within his game, which is actually pretty nice and shows the ability to actually create for himself from that three-point area. But of course, John Wall can also catch and shoot from that three-point range. He can come off a screen and shoot from that three-point area, which is nice as well. He can also do a little bit of a crossover into a three-point jump shot. He doesn't necessarily have side steps and step backs, which is something you would like to see from him, but at the same time, the three-point shot is definitely not in John Wall's cards. He's not really a great three-point shooter, and that's not his main ability. But it is good to see after all the years that John Wall has been improving in terms of his shooting ability in general, and especially his three-point shooting ability, so that's definitely good to see for John Wall going forward. Basically, throughout John Wall's entire career, he's always known as a guy who's an amazing passing and playmaker. In the past, John Wall had so many different seasons where he was in the top tier of assist numbers and was always averaging around 10 or 11 assists per game a bunch of different seasons. It wasn't just one year. John Wall especially thrives specifically in the pick and roll. In the pick and roll, John Wall can either score off that, he can also find his teammate cutting to the basket who's actually in the pick and roll with him, and sometimes if he gets doubled or triple teamed, he's also going to find a guy wide open in the corner for three, maybe wide open at the wing for three, maybe another guy cutting all the way to the basket. Where John Wall really thrives is in the pick and roll offense. But even besides the pick and roll, John Wall can actually cook his defender and really cross him up and force a little bit of a help, and then he would always find that wide open guy in the corner or wherever he is. Overall, John Wall is just very, very smart on the offensive side of the ball and is always going to find the wide open teammate if there is one. Another thing that makes John Wall so effective in terms of his passing and playmaking ability is he's so athletic, as I mentioned, and so quick, so he can easily get the rebound on one end, quickly push it to the other end, and if a teammate's running with him, he can easily find them and they get a wide open easy dunk. So that's another thing that's so effective about John Wall in terms of his passing and playmaking ability, and I think a lot more point guards should actually do this, which is once they get the rebound or their center gets the rebound and gives them the ball, really push the pace, put a ton of pressure on the defense, get on the fast break. Those are the easiest points you can get, and John Wall does that extremely effectively, which is something very good. And on the defensive side of the ball, John Wall has always been known as a really good defender. Now obviously the injuries have definitely hindered that a little bit, but still at this point in John Wall's career, I still think he's at the very least a decent defender on that side of the ball, which is definitely good to see, in addition to everything he does on the offensive side of the ball. But now we have to be honest about John Wall. Clearly, as I mentioned before in the video, he was at the very least an all-star type player, maybe even a superstar type player, but now when you watch John Wall in the Houston Rockets right now, it's pretty clear he's not that player anymore. And of course the main reason for this is all the injuries he's had to go through over the past 2 or 3 seasons. It's crazy how many injuries he's gotten over the past 2 or 3 seasons, and obviously that would have an effect on any NBA player, but especially a guy like John Wall, who didn't necessarily completely rely on his athleticism. As I mentioned, he added some jump shooting within his game, but that definitely was a pretty big part of John Wall's game, driving to the basket, dunking over people, finishing around them, using his athleticism. But now with all those injuries, he's still athletic, but he's not nearly as athletic as he used to be, and obviously that's definitely had an effect on his game. But now let's get to the question of the video, which is, does anybody even want John Wall anymore at this stage of his career? And now the reason that I say this is because there's been reports out recently that both John Wall and the Houston Rockets want to part ways and want to make a trade happen. But at the same time, there hasn't been too much interest around the NBA for a guy like John Wall, and there's a few different reasons for this. Of course, the first reason, which is pretty obvious, is just the injury history that John Wall has went through. Over the past 2 or 3 seasons, as I mentioned before in the video, John Wall has really went through some catastrophic injuries recently, which is obviously not good for him. After all those injuries, John Wall is now not the same player as he was before that, and that's pretty clear. But another risk about all these injuries is that once you get injured a bunch of times in the past, you're more likely to actually get injured again going forward. So of course that's another risk for a lot of different NBA teams looking to potentially trade for John Wall. You don't want to trade for a guy who can potentially get injured again and be out for the entire season. Now you just traded some of your players and some of your assets for a guy who's not even going to play for you. So that's obviously a risk. But the biggest reason why I think there's not much interest at all for John Wall is the contract that he has. John Wall currently has a contract where he's getting paid $40 or $50 million per season. That type of number is a guy you would pay for one of the best players in the NBA, a high-level superstar in this league. But as I mentioned before in the video, at this point in John Wall's career, he's no more than, at the very best, a good level starter in the NBA, maybe even a decent level starter. So if you're trading for John Wall, even if you don't have to give up much, let's say you give up a second-round pick for John Wall, just assuming the money matches. Now you're paying a guy $50 million who at the very best is a good level starter, but also has the capability of actually getting injured and not playing for you whatsoever, and now you're just paying an injured guy who's not playing for you $50 million per year. Obviously the contract is a huge factor on why a lot of different NBA teams don't have interest in John Wall. And I think besides the contract, I think more teams would have some interest to at the very least give John Wall a shot, but the contract is obviously a very big factor. The only way I could honestly see the Houston Rockets trading John Wall, maybe I'm wrong, but the only reason in my opinion is if the Rockets take a bad contract in return for John Wall, or they buy out John Wall and someone else just signs him like that without having to pay John Wall the crazy contract. That's the only way I could see John Wall leaving the Houston Rockets. And by the way, I don't want to make this video seem like I'm bashing John Wall and saying he's not a good player anymore. I still think John Wall is a pretty good player in the NBA, and I would expect after he kind of settles in from all his injuries and gets a lot more comfortable, and that will just come as time goes on without having any injuries, I think John Wall could potentially get back to that all-star level talent. But we'll see what happens going forward. But anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you think any other team would want to trade for John Wall, or do you not think so? But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did enjoy, please leave a like and subscribe and hit that post notification bell. It really helps me out a lot. Until the next time, peace out guys.